In far north Queensland, there is a small town celebrating a big history. Alarish was established in 1920 as a World War I discharged soldiers' settlement. The soldiers named their new home in commemoration of the taking of Alarish during the war. At the time, Alarish was part of Palestine. Today, it is a city of Egypt. During World War I, Egypt's Alarish was a critical supply base for Australian soldiers, saving many lives. Australia's Alarish flourished throughout the 20th century as the soldiers embarked on building a prolific sugarcane industry. "100 years later, in 2020, Alarish remains committed to preserving the significance of its rich history. To celebrate its centenary on 1st of August 2020, Alarish unveiled a new cenotaph featuring a rising sun forged by its local blacksmith. Experience the fascinating history of Alarish by visiting the Alarish Diggers Museum.
Fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the land on which this meeting is being held and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. Councillors and staff, today we are going to have 1 minute silence in memory of Frank McFadden, and I also want to mention that another long-time employee, Gordon Todd, passed away recently. So the 1 minute silence will also reflect on his time with the former Cardboard Council. Gordon's funeral is this afternoon, in fact. Fellow workmates of Frank McFadden have asked me to read out this brief history before we do the minute silence. In 1961, 17-year-old Frank McFadden, still wet behind the ears, disembarked the train from Cairns at the Tully railway station with all his worldly possessions to take up a position as a cadet draftsman with the Kabul Shire Council. Frank was young and enthusiastic and keen to get on with his life, making it relatively easy for him to slip into his new cadetship and familiarise himself with his surroundings. He must have liked what he found because he never looked back. He wasn't going away. Frank quickly endeared himself to the Tully community, forming many lifelong friendships with people from all walks of life. His association with the Tully Tigers Rugby League Club, of which he is a life member, spans 50 years or more. He has been secretary, timekeeper, groundkeeper, gatekeeper and champion ticket seller throughout the years. He is also a life member of the Australian Labor Party, the longest serving member of the Tully Lions Club, a congregation member and long-time volunteer of the Catholic Church and a major contributor to all things community in Tully. Before Frank's health deteriorated, he could be found at the Mount Tyson Hotel, the bottom pub to the locals, on a Saturday morning selling raffle tickets for the Lions Club in one hand and the Tully Tigers in the other. He was always the first person to put his hand in his pocket for a good cause and had a reputation around town of always having a fiver in his pocket for every reason. Frank was held in high regard by his former workmates, and in July 2019, Infrastructure Services Director David Goodman presented a letter of support to Council signed by over 100 employees with a request to name the foreman's office at the Tully Depot the Frank McFadden Building in recognition of Frank's 58 years of service to the Council. In July 2019, the building was officially named in Frank's honour. Please join me in acknowledging 1 minute silence for Frank and Gordon. Thank you. Thank you. We move on to apologies. Do we have any apologies? I'll take that as a no. The declaration of conflict of interest. Declaration of prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and/or comment on other councillors and/or staff interests in accordance with the Act or the regulations. Are there any conflicts to declare? Okay, I'll take that as a no. We move on to confirmation of the minutes. Would somebody move that the local government minutes from the meeting on the 28th of October are a true and accurate record? Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 2, any business arising from minutes? Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Just a question to the CEO on 6.6 that was mentioned last meeting on the transfer stations. When do you think public consultation will commence?
Thanks for the question. The trial started in the adjustment was made in February this year, so it's a 12-month trial. We're going to be collating data early in 2022, and would imagine that towards the middle to end of January 2022, there'll be some consultation once that data has been collated.
Good, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mark, Mayor Nolan and myself attended the Barra Bonanza a couple of weeks ago, and it just blew me away. We had people travelling from Bundaberg to Weipa, and I couldn't believe how it just packed the town out, Mark. Yeah,
look, it was a great event, no doubt, and accommodation was booked out. 83 barramundi were captured in the tournament, and the lucky angler walked away with a $30,000 boat. So significant prize money on offer. There were other prizes such as champion female angler, $10,000, and the junior angler got $2,500 cash. So the support through the sponsorship was unbelievable, and it was really a worthwhile event, no doubt.
Just to finish on it, something that was a highlight to myself was they had to cut the participants down to 250, sorry. And what they did then, if you were a member of that fishing comp, what they did, they had 250 envelopes. They paid an insurance company X amount, and they had $250,000 in one envelope. Now, the person who got the biggest barra had a chance to pick that envelope. The chances are 250 to 1, but it was very, there was a lot of crowd participation, and it was a highlight in my eyes. Thank you.
Just to supplement that, the $250,000 cheque was under number 17, and the champion angler chose number 38, but he didn't go away empty-handed. Second prize was $10,000 cash. So again, the sponsorship was unbelievable at that Barra Bonanza. Any further business arising? If not, I'll move on to item 3, economic activation and tourism. Item 3.1, Cardwell Tropical Mountain bike project feasibility. And I also take the opportunity to acknowledge Auntie Marcia, who is a Gurumay elder, and also Christine Eiley, an activist in the Carball community, and both are very enthusiastic and passionate about this project, hence their presence here today. Welcome. I'll hand over to Mr. Blanchette to present this report.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors, and very pleased to be presenting this report today on a project that has involved community widely in Carball, and as Mr. Mayor acknowledges, it's fantastic, and thank you to Marsha Jerry from Girramay and Christine for attending today. I'll take the report as read for the feasibility study and the ecology report and the economics report, and just skim over a couple of highlights to summarise the report to start. So, unprecedented times with COVID, so this study has been a fresh one for Cassowary Coast. It's not often we get to do destination development work on a whole new product experience that can have such a wide impact for a town like Carball, but also regionally Cassowary Coast and beyond. The standout features for council in working through this project have been that it was community driven, community led, and the community took this project to the hometown of Carball with council in the audience until that was formalised some 5 to 6 months into their process. And so it's a great credit to those community leaders represented by the Kuruma Range Road support group and individuals such as Christine and Kathy Shearhan. Beyond lobbying council and any set of areas they could find in Carball, they also networked and kept the communication going and pretty much led the stakeholder community meetings on the ground in Carball. Another standout feature is culture participating. We've already mentioned Marsha Jerry here today for the Girramay people. Girramay have been a valuable component right through the process, and it's represented here today. And that it was community led has been very motivating and led us to a situation in 2019 where council formalised support and lobbied state government for funding, which was matched. So the total project was 50,000 from council and 50,000 from state government. And we proceeded into the feasibility study. With us on that journey, our partner stakeholders were the community representatives, Girramay, with support of Girrigan, Wet Tropics Management Authority, Queensland Parks and Wildlife Services and Department of Environmental Services, HQ Plantations, which have a lease over some of the scope area, and of course Council, the Queensland Government and the Carball community representatives. When you look through the report, you'll see terminology such as ride destination, and in those 6 months of the community leading this project, they made it very clear that their objective, their ambitions were to make Carball a ride destination, not just a trail network, a ride destination. The model for that was Derby in Tasmania, and again, community led that as the objective for us to model off. Through the process, the contractor that was successful in working on the project was World Trails, and coincidentally they developed the Derby Trails in Tasmania, so there was very good connection knowledge of Derby. In addition to that, they are based in far north Queensland, so they can relate and understand the elements of our terrain, our dirt, which is one of the jargons that are used when you're talking about mountain bike trails, the dirt, the conditions, the tropics. You will see in the report that there's 6 key components to a ride destination, and those were a key feature and topic through the project. Connectivity, quality trails, progressive expansion, natural features, which Carball has an abundance of, pubs and accommodation, which are very important to most travellers, but also to the mountain bike culture, and event overlays. The product itself, the feasibility concept report, identifies a map of concept trails. Through the project, we've been communicating, this is just a feasibility report and concept trails. It's pretty much a desktop analysis, a helicopter view with little on the ground. That is the first stage in a project to develop destination trails, the right destination mountain bike trails. There is a flow chart in the report that highlights that. So if you look at the flow chart, we're at stage one. A lot of the interaction and questions are very valuable, but they related to the next stage of a development such as this, the detailed design stage. In the flow from a concept feasibility study, the next step would be to take on a business case to lead to the detailed design work. Detailed design work is a lot of on-the-ground work, and it will delve further, as this report requests, delve further into traditional owner mapping, on-the-ground work in ecology, and further detail working with the other stakeholders, national parks, wet tropics, and HQ plantations. The product itself, which is key to success, and for those that have been on the journey of the project, it's very clear that a ride destination has 6 important components. If you cut corners off one or the other, you change the product and you move further away from your goal of a derby type successful product. The highlights identified in this product are there 3 key areas of trails. And these are a little group of trails around the Carwell Lookout area. There's another set on a small range close to town called the Seven Sisters. And then the third area is out the back near Addy Creek. Now these are all mapped, so you can get an idea of how those trails are laid and how they link. Linkages are very important to the network. Another key component throughout this has been connectivity to town. And in the words of mountain bikers and World Trails, when you arrive in your car, you take the bike out and you shouldn't use your car again until you're ready to leave. And that's about connectivity and access to town. Mountain bikes, there's a few other highlights here which get into a little bit of mountain bike terminology, but I do want to clarify that mountain biking is not about Lycra. Just to be clear today, it's got a culture of its own, it's well established and heavily growing. The trail network presented here has just a little over 94 kilometres of trails. Another key component to be a successful ride destination is you need 85k of trail or more. Enough trails that people can't do it all in 1 day or 2 days. They just need to stay and explore a little bit longer. So that's the qualification of the kilometres of trail. This presents 26 individual trails, and then you get into jargon like flow trails, airflow, gravity, which is exciting for the customers that this would target. One extremely rare highlight is there's one trail identified that could be a 9-kilometre downhill trail. So that is very rare. Adding to all this are the elements of Carwell. So an important component of this is the success to the economy and to the community of Carwell. Mountain bikers in general, a big day on a bike would be 3 hours. On an e-bike, that's quite attainable now. So normally 2 to 3 hours is a big day on the bike. The rest of that day is spent exploring and playing in the destination, and that's where the value is added from a product like this. There are benefits, some are in there. There's an indication of the visitor numbers, the revenue, the costs to build this product, and the detail behind that, again, would be taken forward in the detailed design work. So you need a business case to go to that work. The considerations in that detailed design work would look at the management models, including the revenue generation. So a key factor for consideration going forward in the next stage would be the management model, the cost of that, who manages it, and that would be obviously involve the stakeholder partners on the ground. Fortunately for us, there are successful models that we have detail of that, as well as a management model, they link it to a revenue generation system. And a few years ago, a councillor and I met with Dorset Council, who run the Derby mountain range. At that stage, the revenue generation was covering 90% of the council costs to the mountain trail network. So the devil's in the detail. As I say, that's in the next stage, but there is a balance to that. In summary, the product has value to lead our destination. We are blessed on the Cassowary coast with world-class assets of Great Barrier Reef, our rainforests, our waterfalls, our trails. It's very rare through the chair that we've had a destination development project to look at like this to lead us to our next big product or experience for the region. And this is the opportunity we have through this report. Finally, I just want to mention probably the standout feature overall for this product is Cardwell itself. And you can't overestimate the quality of Cardwell as an experience, as a destination. So the elements that would combine with a mountain bike product to take it beyond any other mountain bike trail in Queensland is when you're off the bike, you've got access to the Great Barrier Reef, you've got the access to the Hinchinbrook Island trails, to the World Heritage Rainforest, Kirrima Range Road. So those components complement the opportunity of the mountain bike network to take it to a unique position. And the icing on the cake, if I can put it that way, is the connection with culture, which is being valued by all the stakeholders on the project, and particularly by council through the process. So I'll just wrap up with a final statement that I'd like to thank Marcia for letting us share. And should we progress a business case and a detailed design, we will present people the opportunity to ride where our ancestors once walked, Girramay country. And I'll just sum up with a recommendation, Mr. Chairman. The recommendation the council receives this report and recommends of the Cardwell Tropical Mountain Bike Trail Project Feasibility Report.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchett. Before we go to the councillors, I'd just like to refer to the CEO who has managed two big projects in West Australia in recent times. The official opening occurred on the weekend, so he has an insight into feasibility studies, and I'd like to get a feel for what you think about this project, Mr. Graffin, in terms of what you delivered in Broome with the Chinatown project and the jetty, and the feasibility behind this project. How do you weigh it up?
Through the chair, this project's got so much potential and that connection with both culture and the backing of the community. There's a real opportunity here to develop something. I guess as the report highlights, that business case is quite critical to be able to use that to attract funding. This isn't just about Cardwell. This is about Queensland as a destination and bringing people in, and will impact Cardwell specifically, but you would imagine more broader far north Queensland. So I think a lot of potential there, and looking at a business case to really look at what those benefits are and quantify those, so funding can be attracted to this project, is critical.
Thank you for that insight. Councillors, Councillor Millwood.
Good morning, through the chair. Good morning, Marcia, and good morning, Christine. Okay, so just be patient here. I've got a lot of questions to ask. Mr. Blanchett, while I appreciate the efforts so far in the mountain bike project, I must ask if council has sought to do a cost-benefit analysis. If so, how much will the business case? How much is the business case going to cost?
So thank you, councillor. We have done basic analysis of costs. So a business case, we haven't briefed up what the business case would involve, So an estimate would be a budget of $50,000, dare I estimate.
So that's on top of the 50,000 that's been done for the feasibility study?
Yeah, the feasibility study is completed, so that was match funding the state of 50,000 from
Okay,
council.
so while the feasibility study has been done, in my experience, these studies can show massively inflated benefits. The report notes that the building of the trail network will generate employment and $9.9 million of new economic benefits in the construction period and 18.13 million after the construction. How do they know this, or is this just an assumption?
Through the chair, so the economics report was done by Cummins, so they're an established economic data consultant. Some of the questions you may ask today we won't have the answer of because they're probably more relative to the detailed design work, which the business case would take us to. So Councillor, and through the chair, we may not have the answers to some of these questions today because the concept report is a helicopter view, a desktop view, and that these questions, however, are valuable and we should capture them to take forward if we can. But just want to declare, I apologise if I don't have the answers because
That's okay. I've just got to ask the questions because I read them in the report, so I require answers at some stage. It also states that the full-time employees stated in this construction period, so it says that there's potential for 10 new employees. My question is, are they employees that would be required to be on the Cassowary Coast Regional Council books, or would they be employed in the community?
Through the chair, the construction process would likely be tendered out. That would be pending business case, pending funding, but those employees through the construction period would likely be tendered. This sort of project is quite a specific project. Shaping some of these trails is certainly not something, a skill set that council has in-house.
Okay, because as it's not really an economic benefit to council if we've got to pay for another 10 full-time employees, that's be another big cost to our ratepayers. So after the construction phase, if the hordes of people don't come to this very beautiful destination, who will pick up the tab for this? Is my other question.
Well, Councillor, and through the chair, we're hypothesising there. It's, as I say, it's a concept, it's a helicopter report. One benefit we do have is the quality of the live examples of ride destination, modelled through places like St Helens and Derby. And we have considered, when we looked at the Derby model, we're actually assessing St Helens. So, for example, St Helens is 50 kilometres from Derby, very, very close. And with all the success of Derby, that council still dove into a multi-million-dollar mountain bike development. And of course, all eyes were watching because of the competition element. Would it shift? Will they move from here to there? Or it's actually both have actually grown in numbers. So while we have got pretty good qualified data in the concept plan, there are live data that from operating mountain bike trails that we can access to.
Okay, so do you know if Cairns has been given the green light for the exact same project but on a much larger scale?
What I know about that, I haven't been researching that closely, but what I do know is Cairns approach has been a lobby approach. They haven't started through a community engagement process, including culture and wet tropics. They've gone from a different angle. Interestingly, our neighbour council in Cairns and our neighbour council in Atherton, both those LGAs have had mountain bike trail networks for a decade or more. Both of them are stamping up saying these have value, we want to invest more, including Cairns and Atherton. The reason why they're doing that is they hadn't hit that quantum of trail they need to be a ride destination. They're part of they're shown interest. Cairns has mountain bike credibility from hosting World Championships, but it hasn't got enough trails to be a destination. So they're early in the process, and I know they've come from that angle, but they haven't engaged the culture and the wet tropics stakeholders.
Thank you. Has there been any thought given to upgrading the track that we already have through the H Road, which is up near Cardston?
The H Roads near Cardstone, so that is a totally different concept. That's a one-way A to B trail, like the Misty Mountain Trails. This is quite a different product.
Okay.
So so that has been talked about in the past, but it hasn't been proposed to revisit that.
So I've got a few more things here. Sorry, people. We should not be comparing ourselves to Derby, as we are as far from Derby as we possibly can be, and making assumptions that we can be the same is not in the best interest of our ratepayers. So we have the climate and location are far, far from being in comparisons, in my opinion. Also, who will benefit from this project and who will be responsible for the costs of the building and the maintenance?
Through the chair, I think it's probably worth making the point that the recommendation is that council receives the report and the recommendations of the feasibility report. So where there's no commitment here of funds to progress at this stage, that would come back for council to consider funding either a business case and or the project. So some of this information isn't available yet. It's a feasibility study that's been undertaken by some experts in this field that are making these assumptions based on their background and the work that they've done over decades in this field. So this report today is about presenting that to inform of that there is a great deal of potential here, but not necessarily committing any funds or making any decisions around funding the project for construction or the ongoing maintenance.
So all of the pages that I read are purely really assumptions basically in that report, because if we're not making any decisions, and as you've just clarified that they are assumptions, so that's good. And the other thing is, so we are just accepting the recommendation that we accept the report that's been handed before us, and we're not making any decisions on this moving forward.
Through the chair, the recommendation is to receive the report and the recommendations, and any funding that needs to be allocated would be an item that would either come to council for consideration during a budget process or as a separate item requesting to fund that.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchett.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Millwood. I just want to make a comment about the very comprehensive report that Mr. Blanchett presented a minute ago. And the most critical thing to me was the project is all about Carbel itself. We all know, looking at the wider scope, that there are exciting things happening at Carbel at the moment with Port Hinchinbrook normalisation. We now have state and federal funding promised. The funding agreements are being drawn up. The infrastructure agreement has been drawn up by Queensland Treasury. So we've got 3 levels of government working together to make Carbel happen. And this project will be the icing on the cake. So I agree entirely. The report is more about Carbel itself than just the mountain bike trail, because there's a lot of good positive things happening in Carbel right now, and this is going to build on that. Councillor Chewy.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I would just like to say well done on the report, and it's great to see so many groups involved in the project. But I just would further to Mr. Mayor's comments, it is about Cardwell, and I think that's wonderful, but I know people that in my neck of the woods that are also very excited about this proposal. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, yeah, I would like to speak to the extensive report, and it's very well written. I did spend the time going through the entire thing. It's been put together, and it is a feasibility study. I mean, we do need to understand that if this progresses to the next stage, the business cases will be put together, and that's where a lot of these questions can be answered. The thing that impressed me so much about this project, Mr. Mayor, is that it's community-led. There's a collegiate, cooperative approach. Everyone's being involved. I want to commend the team, especially on the engagement up front with the traditional owners and with other First Nations people in the area, and also the engagement up front with the Tropics Management Authority. A lot of the time that's not front of mind when a lot of these projects are designed, and I think it's amazing that the entire organisation have gone out, and thank you, Anne and Marcia, for being part of this, and thank you, Christine. It's amazing that we're all working together. We've got all levels of government, geographically distant from where one is working. I mean, I'm the Cassowary coast, and I'm going to push the sail here, being the heart of the Wet Tropics World Heritage Area and the birthplace of the Great Barrier Reef Park, I think will be more highly visited than other facilities throughout the country and the nation. I've even dusted off my mountain bike in preparation. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines.
And I would move the recommendation if I may.
You're welcome to do that. We'll go to, we have a seconder, Councillor Barnes, and we'll now go to B2 to speak. Councillor Barnes.
I also would like to thank Mr Blanchett for a great report, and our speakers, CEO, Mayor and Councillor Baines. At this stage, I think all this is positive with the mountain bikes. We're so lucky to have the support of the community. We're so lucky to have the support of the traditional owners. We're so lucky to have the support of governments. We're lucky to have world trails, or world leaders in many countries in the world to classify the area as a perfect area for this project. And this area being the southern gateway to our region, I think will be a great hit not only for our tourism, but our businesses and our youth and our families, of which some people forget about. And well, that's all I'd like to say at this stage, and I'll be seconding that motion, Mr Mayor.
Okay, that's recorded. Any further comments? Councillor Millwood.
Yeah, so through the chair, don't get me wrong, I too commend you on the work that you've done, Mr Blanchett, but I'd just like to put out there that, you know, there were other things put forward at the Cardwell Community Futures Forum, and, you know, number one priority down there was the dredging. So I think we need to prioritise for Cardwell what is more important than what should come first on the list of things to do.
Mr CEO.
Through the chair, this process is early on. The feasibility is a really important part, but like we said, there's a process now to fund that, whereas we are engaging at the moment with the federal government around issues like the dredging and the state and federal government around issues like the normalisation of Port Hinchinbrook. So those are further progressed than where we're at here, but again, this certainly highlights a amazing potential.
Yeah, through the chair, if I just acknowledge that comment and recognise this was a team. I'm sort of the mug in front of the microphone, but there's a whole team of council behind this and the team of other stakeholders. Just on a side note, we have already had some hits from this potential project. I didn't want to talk about the Early Works project for a degree of separation. So we have $492,000 state-funded project to develop a bike product at Cardwell Sports Ground, come through COVID recovery in state with Tropics funding that will complement the bigger project at the time, but it can stand alone. We've also had a major events company come and assess the site on the ground. Before the concept plan was finished, they were tuned in to assess it. And we have a relationship with Red Bull, as we know, councillors through Red Bull Defiance. They've just launched they're launching this weekend, I believe, a new event which involves mountain bike trails, but it's actually running. So we have a pretty high calibre brand partner there that has an event that will complement when you're not riding them. They have got a new event to take to trails. So some side opportunities, just acknowledging the team that was part of this beyond myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Blanchett. I think it's also important to look at our economy as a whole. We're reliant heavily on primary producers, bananas and cane. We need to get into another pillar of support, and adventure tourism is definitely the way we should be going. Whitewater rafting, Red Bull, mountain bike, etc., etc. We need to broaden our economy in terms of the rate take. Currently, primary producers contribute 29% of our rates. We need to take the pressure off that sector, and if we can do it through adventure tourism, I think it's a good way to go, because once COVID relaxes, Queensland's going to be invaded with visitors, and we need to have our doors open and to welcome that out. And if that means putting them on a mountain bike or putting them on a whitewater rafter or diving onto Eddy Bay, we don't care. As long as they're coming to our area, spending a few nights, spending a few dollars, that's going to help our economy. And as I said, broaden our rate base away from just bananas and cane. Any further comments or questions? Would somebody move the recommendation, please? I was moved and seconded, sorry. Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Blanchett. Now on to your next report, 3.2, Tourism Monthly Report.
Yes, I apologise for my continuing monotone. If we proceed with the tourism report, again, I'll take the report as read and just skim over for noting. Agritourism Workshop was held on the 15th September. We're at front stage there, thanks to good work of Director Sadler and connecting with the councillor at the time with DAF early. We were second cab off the rank across Queensland for hosting that workshop, which was about connecting farmers with the opportunities to diversify into agritourism. The skipping through, just touched on a couple of events. On a side note, we have had some really high calibre and successful community-led events in the region. You mentioned the Barra Bonanza earlier. We are all familiar of other events that have been on, like the Carbel UFO Festival, the Tropical Art Deco, and Seafest recently. For the report, I've just touched on Targa briefly to highlight that there will be a full report on that event coming. We just haven't managed to secure the event organiser for the final debrief. So we've got a debrief, we just need to catch up with them. When we do the debrief, we're looking at our event measures compared to the results, but also opportunities we want to leverage for the next year. So I just think it's important to have that all in the one report. We'll do that. The Red Bull Defiance, a little bit more on that as it was postponed. This was a casualty of COVID. Probably late August was the worst time for an event, any event, during the COVID ups and downs. Unfortunately for us, we had a loss on that in that the event was sold out. And I put some data from 2019 in there. So there's over 800 hotel nights in 2019 that would have come back with these athletes. So that's sort of the unseen economy that we won't see. On the upside, we still had a win. So our investment gets postponed with the event, but we still had substantial exposure to the Red Bull audience. And you can see the data there with 1.3 million engagements. So still some positives for that, and they've committed to come back next year. There's a summary of the TCT activity there. And I think Councillor McLeod may have a bit more on this than me, having attended the board meeting. But just noting, with an LTO, it gives you opportunity to leverage funding. And in this activity report, you'll see they've had some great wins for the region in that regard, related to the Carmine Fishing Tournament and the summer campaign that they're working on now. They have taken, I think, an interesting positive direction in that they are elevating their website and their marketing to pull some of our hidden gems to the front line. So by next Wednesday, they tell me their new website will be up, and it's going to feature, pull some of our sub-regions, if you like, out of the crowd. So highlights will have places like Cowley Beach, Carmine Beach, Eddy Bay, amongst Mission Beach, Innisfail, Tully and Cardwell. So that is coming ahead of us. Won't go through the social media data except to highlight that events was the #1 engagement for this period, which is interesting to note. And there's a summary of the other activity, attending the caravan camping shows in Brisbane, ATE, and an extensive campaign at the Cairns Central Shopping Mall. A summary of the Carmine reach through the exposure of that video creek to coast that they supported there. So in summary, that's my report for council to note.
Thank you, Mr Blanchett. Councillor McLeod, the portfolio holder, go to you first.
Thanks. Yes, through the chair, having the tourism and economic development portfolio, it was great to see so many businesses participate to help make Targa the success it was. But not only the businesses, but Innisfail turned up to support this event to create an excellent atmosphere in Targa Town. TCT, which is Tropical Coast Tourism, is doing amazing work for our tourism industry. They successfully negotiated a $36,000 investment from TTNQ, which is Tourism Tropical North Queensland, as a co-contribution to create the Summer in the Tropics campaign, the coolest place to be this summer, which will be launched from December 1st this year. They also joined forces with Cairns Central Shopping Centre as part of a 10-week staycation campaign, which exposed 20,000 people per day on what our region has to offer, and another 80,000 consumers per day through a campaign in the Cairns Post, where TCT members were given the opportunity to advertise in this campaign with an exclusive member offer. Most of you are aware of the exposure the Curramine Beach Fishing Comp received on the TV show Creek to Coast recently. This is a real credit to TCT, who secured support of $7,500 from TTNQ and $15,000 from Garmin to resource the production, which reached just over 696,000 Australians to our region. So just to summarise the above, TCT have secured leverage funding of just over $58,000 to promote our region. So they're doing some amazing things. And I'm encouraging any business that has had a tourist walk through their doors to get in touch with TCT to increase the tourism industry's representation.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. Councillor Pervin.
Yes, Mr. Blanchett. I think you know where I'm going to be heading with this one. Your monthly report has not made mention of anything about the relocation of the Tourist Information Centre to the Innisfail Conservatorium. I asked for a report some time ago to come back. I haven't heard nothing. Would you be able to give me a rundown where we're at with this? And yeah, I know myself and some community members are very keen to get behind the relocation of the Tourist Information Centre to the Innisfail Conservatorium, but we're waiting for information.
Through the chair, I have been discussing this with the tourism coordinator, and there's a commitment to present the draft report to the executive management team on the 23rd of November. That then needs to be reviewed by the executive management team. Obviously, the creation of a new location comes with budget and staffing implications. So there has been a large body of work put together trying to piece together what the fit out of that location will cost, and I guess that report needs to come back and genuinely inform council of what those implications would be in relation to both staff and cost implications. So we are hoping, pending that report going through MT, that will come to council for consideration at the meeting in December.
Okay, thank you. Because I know we've Councillor McLeod attended some consultation recently, and it was very positive. Would you be able to give us a bit of feedback on that one, Councillor McLeod?
Yeah, sorry, through the chair, was here. We did meet in regards to the Vic being moved to the Conservatorium. The consultations with the user groups has been done, and it was very positive by all that did attend. And the report will be presented to council once it is completed.
Thank you for that, Councillor Pervin, Councillor McLeod. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, Mr Blanchett, I feel sorry for you.
Council.
So it's okay. Do we still financially contribute to Townsville Enterprises?
Only a membership fee, and that is relevant to having a destination presence in Townsville. So the short logic of that is yes, we have a membership, and that's so that Cassowary Coast can be presented to tourists there that might want to come.
Yeah, so the reason that I'm asking this is that they recently presented their Drive North website, which has been launched by them, and Cassowary Coast does not seem to get a mention in the media release. So it says we should get back to the same exposure as, well, I think we should get the same exposure as the Outback Queensland, Mackay, Whitsundays and Cairns region and it mentions tropical North Queensland, tourism tropical North Queensland, but it doesn't actually mention anything about Cassowary Coast. So I just wondered where we sat with that.
Yeah, sure. Through the chair, there's some visible RTO boundary. So regional tourism organisations like Townsville Enterprise and Tourism Tropical North Queensland, with Sundays, etc., have a boundary that they market, and the boundary line falls. Yeah, so Hinchinbrook Shire goes under Townsville, the shire named after one of our islands, dare I state, and Cassowary Coast is north under Tourism Tropical North Queensland. So from the consumer marketing perspective, TT&Q will represent the Cassowary Coast. Our membership with Townsville Enterprise is quite simple to get our brochures in Townsville, otherwise they're not there. But from a marketing perspective, they wouldn't normally promote the Cassowary Coast. At a whisper, they do promote our Hinchinbrook Island though, so we do get a subtle win from Townsville Enterprise, but hopefully that explains, Councillor.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Chewy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Blanchett, on a great and a successful session with tourism. I think Cassowary Coast was booming through the last few months. You did touch briefly on Art Deco, and that was a great event and did bring people into the area. And the other one was the On a Mission. And we talk about bums on seats. Well, this was bums in boats and bums on bikes. So, and it was very well attended. And of course, every visitor that comes is dollars in our towns. So congratulations to all the events and all the organisers that have made them happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Any further questions or comments? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blanchett. We move on to item 4, Governance, Environment and Finance. 4.1, Roadside Vending Guidelines, and Mr. Sadler will present this report. Welcome.
Morning, Council.
Morning.
I'm presenting this on behalf of the Manager of Regulatory Services. He's not available today. So what you have in front of you, Council, is a report, and I'll take it as read. And it is how we workshopped in our Council information session about a fortnight ago. So what we do have is our roadside vending guideline, and I suppose the highlight is that we reviewed that guideline in accordance with the discussions that we had over a number of workshops, and from the 2019 version, you now have a 2021 version, which includes a number of things, but particularly highlighting the Fitzgerald Esplanade piece as a Type 1 tendered site for roadside vending. So I'll take the report as read, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. Any questions? Councillor Chewy.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Sadler, through the chair. And I apologise if we did discuss them earlier, but I don't remember. I see that we're allowing 3 per site, like that's in the guidelines. Will there ever be a time where only one, or there'll have to be 3 different vendors per site if we allow 3? Is that correct? That was my understanding. I'm just seeking confirmation.
So through the chair, for a number of sites, that is correct. For a number of others, it physically can't fit 3. So each site has its unique pieces, and I suppose depending on the nature of the vending and whether it can fit, and from a safety perspective, those type of things.
So, and secondly, when a roadside vendor does come to council, do we have a contract that they are selling what it is they're selling? All of a sudden, another roadside vendor comes along, they're selling lentil burgers, and I think that's a good idea, they're doing really well. Can I all of a sudden call them something else, but ultimately still be selling lentil burgers, even though I'm not supposed to be, if that makes sense?
Yep, through the chair. Interesting question. Thank you, Councillor. I suppose with any change, if they do have a tendered site, with any change, they'll need to obviously communicate that with council, and it'll be assessed against the guidelines. Based on the guideline, we do have there's 6 key principles there, and as long as it meets within those key principles, and I suppose the bricks and mortar businesses that are around it, then there should not be any issue.
Any further questions or comments? Councillor Perman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. Just in relation to the map there, we talk about in the report about the Fitzgerald Esplanade allowing for to be an area that can have roadside vending, but in the map it's actually classified as it's an area that can't be. I don't know if that's a typo and that needs to be corrected, but if you look at the map on page number 7, it'll show that, yeah, Fitzgerald Esplanade's clearly in the exclusion zone.
Through the chair, it is except for the type 1. So type 1 sits separate to that exclusion zone. So those specific locations in type 1 are not, but broadly, I think that's the mobile vendor exclusion zone Innisfail map you're referring to.
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
So those type 2 and type 3 would be excluded from that area. Yep.
Okay, no worries. I was just getting a bit worried there. Also, in the guidelines, it talks of 400 metres. Is that something? If they just guidelines, can they be changed, or is that stipulation where we has to be 400 metres from another business?
So through the chair, Councillor Perman, thanks for the question. As we workshopped that, we actually reduced the distances based on the workshop piece, and because it is a guideline, that yes, we can review that as time goes on.
All right, so it's not actually in concrete. All these guidelines can be amended if need be.
This is only a guideline.
Yep.
Yes, Councillor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Sadler.
Thank you, Councillor Perman. Any further questions or comments? If not, somebody move the recommendation, please. Yep, moved by Councillor Toohey, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 4.2, the finance report, and Ms Bradley will present this report.
Good morning, councillors.
Welcome. Morning.
So this morning I have for you our finance report for the month of October, and included in this is our finance report and our monthly council reporting package. So the report in front of you still has our 21-22 original adopted budget, which is reflected in this report, with our RB1 budget expected to come to council later on this month. So the report provides information and tracks council's year-to-date revenue and expenditure across departments, programs and by services, and also includes some financial statistical data that highlights council's operations. So some of the key highlights include operational revenue sitting at 41.56 million, which is 1.37 million under budget in comparison to the budget of 42.9 million. Operating expenditure sitting at 30.66 million, which is 2.64 million under budget in comparison to the budget of 33.3 million. The month-end cash balance is sitting at 54.4 million. Capital expenditure for the month totaled 2.3 million, and year-to-date capital expenditure, including commitments, total 17.7 million, which is 20% of the full year budget expended, excluding commitments, or 39% including commitments. Council's financial sustainability ratios at the end of October, the operating surplus ratio was sitting at 26.24%, which is slightly above the targeted range due to the timing of rates revenue. Asset sustainability ratio is sitting at 80%, which is under the threshold. So this is due to the timing of our capital works and capitalisations this year to date. Our net financial liabilities ratio is sitting at minus 90.7%, which is within the targeted range of below 60%. Some of the key areas to note on page 3 include our net rates and utilities, which is currently tracking 1.7 million under budget. Due to a change in accounting for council's internal rates revenue, reflected in actuals but not yet adjusted in the budget to be reviewed by council, which represents a $1.1 million reduction, plus the timing of our fire contribution payment. Fees and charges are currently tracking 217,000 over budget. So this is additional revenue for building fees that have been generated year to date, certificates, water and sewerage, trade waste and camping fees, offset by reduced meeting room revenue generated year to date. Interest is currently tracking 116,000 under budget, with 50,000 of that relating to interest on investments, which has been noted as a budget risk and will continue to be monitored. Internal revenue is currently tracking over budget due to the change in accounting for the internal rates, as mentioned, for that budget proposed to be adjusted in RB1. Employee expenditure is tracking under budget by $994,000 due to the last 2 weeks of October's wages and salaries weren't processed at the time that this report and data was pulled from the system. Contract labour is currently tracking $138,000 over budget due to backfill positions within the roads team, caravan parks, transfer stations and workplace health and safety. Materials and services is tracking $1.3 million under budget due to reduced fuel usage and maintenance expenditure year to date, the timing of our audit fees that haven't yet been issued, insurance savings, reduced contractor expenditure across landscaping, cleaning and green waste, as well as reduced chemical purchases across our water, sewage and swimming pools. In addition to that, depreciation is tracking under budget by $167,000 due to the timing of the annual asset register roll post our audit and capitalisations processed to date. Internal expenditure is tracking under budget by $268,000 due to a delay in delivery of the new waste plant that we have spoken about. Capital grants are tracking over budget by $921,000 relating to DRFA grant revenue received for Upper Darragee Road, and the budget's proposed to be changed in RB1 to reflect that revenue. Gain on asset disposal relates to proceeds from sale of fleet items and freehold land offset by loss on asset disposal, which is over budget due to the timing of capitalisations and netting off at $1.3 million over budget. From an investment perspective, Council's $54.4 million at the end of the month. I have noticed a mistake in this report. The average interest rate for the month of October was actually 0.66%. As you can see in that table there, we've got a variety of places that we have our money invested, with thankfully seeing some rise in interest rates this month, which will hopefully be a continuing, definitely. Capital projects. So our budget currently sits at $35.4 million at this stage, with the estimated carryover 10.4, which will be revised in RB1 with actual carryover, giving us a total budget of $45.8 million. Year-to-date expenditure sitting at $9.1 million, commitments at $8.5 million, which is 19.8% of our budget expended. As mentioned earlier, budget risks that we are currently monitoring, these haven't changed since the last report, being around Port Hinchinbrook Road and sewerage assets and the implications of that, vacant positions that are being held across the business, asset rationalisation that has been progressing, interest on investments, as well as NDRRA emergent works for 3 events, and the timing of revenue recognition for those. Happy to take any further questions there might be.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. Any questions or comments for the officer? Councillor Millwood.
This is just a comment. I'd just like to thank you for your valuable contribution to the Cassowary Coast Regional Council, and it's very sad to see you going, and I wish you all the best in your future.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank you
Millwood.
very much, Councillor Millwood.
Any further questions or comments for the officer? Councillor Mains.
Well, further to and on the same theme, I would like to thank Leah for all her work done over the years and all she has taught me in this space, but I'd also like to congratulate her on this great opportunity that she's taking. And yes, sad our loss, but the other council I think are going to do extremely well. So it's excellent work. Thank you for all your help over the years.
Thank you all. You aren't getting rid of me yet. I'm still here for another council meeting. So,
Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Dewey. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Bradley. We move on to item 4.3, the Audit Committee report, and Mr Singh will present this report. Mr Singh.
Good morning all. Councillors, as I've previously mentioned, the Audit Committee meets every quarter, and the last meeting was a special meeting, so the actual meeting itself was for the adoption of the financial statements and also looking at council's closing report. So, councillors, as part of the requirements under the local government regulations, we are required to present the draft minutes of the audit committee and highlight any discussion points that has been flagged at the meeting. So attached are the minutes, and if there's any comments, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Any questions or comments for the officer? If not, somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor McLeod. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 4.3. 4.4, the adoption of the annual report, and Mr. Singh will present.
Councillors, Council is required under Section 182 of the LGR to adopt an annual report within 1 month of the audit opinion being signed. So the annual report itself contains both our financial statements and also how Council has performed over the 12 months. It provides to the community the overall the overall effectiveness of how we have conducted our business, and also at the same time it shows our commitment to achieving our vision for the region. So within the annual report, obviously it is made up of different sections of the report, whereby the intent is to provide the community with information around our operational plan results. So we have done it a little bit different this year. So I will take us through the annual report. So if we go to page 19, so on page 19, I'll just briefly touch on the layout and the structure this year. So we are reporting under our previous corporate goals. So the previous corporate goals, which was part of the 2018-2022 corporate plan. So the first one there, growth and economic sustainability. Overall, council had 25 plan initiatives. We delivered on 16, so 64% completion there. On the next page, under community first, council had overall 42 initiatives. We ended up completing 27 initiatives, so roughly around 64%. And then the third one, which was sustainable infrastructure, 32 initiatives, completed 18 at 56%. In responsible governance, overall 84 planned initiatives, completed 54. So council, just note there are some initiatives that are being carried forward into this financial year, and we have also updated our corporate plan. So what you'll see is all our goals are different going forward. So obviously we have 5 now compared to 4 previously. In terms of the statutory information, so obviously that's covered in the report on page 24, 25, and then the other bit of the report covers our corporate governance and also other legislative requirements that council has to adhere to. So that's been covered on the annual report. So councillors, in terms of the financial statements that are attached, so obviously you are well aware that council has received a unmodified opinion, and as the mayor previously highlighted, that's our 13th in a row. In terms of the net results, we did finish the year with a positive net result of 4.37 million. Unfortunately, we did not meet the operational operating surplus target, so that's something we didn't meet. But going forward, from a long-term perspective, we are still targeting to meet our ratios going forward. So with those words, councillors, I would also like to thank the staff across the organisation. So obviously it takes a lot of effort in trying to deliver these services and also trying to bring the annual report together. In particular, I would like to highlight the hard work put in by the governance and the comms team, so trying to collate all this information and presenting it in a different form. I think that's something we need to acknowledge, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Councillor Millwood.
No, I don't have a question. I'd just like to say that I thought that the annual report in its presentation was really good and very easy to read, so well done.
Okay, before we put it to a vote, I just want to talk to a couple of points in the annual report. Congratulations on another unmodified audit, which is the 13th in a row. Put that into context, the starting point was 2008, where a forced amalgamation brought on by the Queensland government saw the Johnson Shire, who were financially distressed, amalgamated with the Kabul Shire, who had a rating of moderate. So 13 unmodified audits coming from a start point of forced marriage, and one of the councils was financially distressed. I think that emphasises the great work that's been done by our departments across the finance sector. The first steps of asset rationalisation occurred with immense due diligence and stakeholder engagement taking place with user groups before any discussions were made. The process has taken longer than expected. However, Council wants to ensure we reach the right resolution for each asset for our community. Primary production contribution to the rate take again reduced to approximately 29% as per the rate referencing group recommendation back in 2009. Back then, primary production take sat at 33%. During the 2021 period, residents no longer experienced boil water announcements thanks to Council's ongoing investment in the completion of the Bulgan Creek Reservoir, which will support over 7,000 residents. Youth development, continued investment in our youth through the apprentice and traineeship program. We also have the mentoring program with Innisfail State College that will assist students in learning real life skills. Finally, thank you and congratulations to the finance team on their great work and commitment completing the financial statements in a timely manner, which has resulted in an unmodified opinion and no significant issues in the closing report provided by the Queensland Audit Office. There are 2 dot points in the recommendation. Firstly, Council note the audited financial statements for 2021 financial year, and 2, adopt the annual report for the 2021 financial year. Would somebody move that, please? Moved by the Chair of Governance, Rox, Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I've got to go to Cargill and represent Council on Remembrance Day.
Yeah, just want to have that recorded in the minutes that Councillor Barnes is required at Cardwell for the Remembrance Day commemoration, and he's recording his departure from the meeting. Okay, we move on to 4.5, the local government meeting dates, and I'll hand over to our CEO, Mr. Graffin, to present his report.
Thank you, Chair. Under the local government regulations, Council is required to advertise the details of its meeting dates and times. This report presents to Council on the proposed meeting dates for the 22 calendar year. Under Section 257 of the local government regulations, it states that local governments must meet at least once in each month. Research conducted by officers has highlighted that out of 76 local governments in Queensland, 64 are currently meeting monthly. Officers are proposing here to streamline Council's decision-making process and to also improve the agenda preparation cycle. That's proposed that Council in 22 will hold one meeting on the last Thursday of every month from January to December. Noting that, however, historically Council have had a shutdown period in December, January across the Christmas New Year period, and as such in this report it's recommended that the December meeting is proposed to be held on the 3rd Thursday of that month. The meeting dates are in the recommendation, and it's the officer's recommendation that Council hold as per those meeting dates at 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Graffin. I'll move the recommendation and speak to it with the following dot points. Back in 2008, when the amalgamation took place, there was angst in the community, both north and south, and they wanted to retain their head office, if you like, the Tully Chamber and the Innisfail Chamber. We struck an agreement that we would alternate between those venues for the fortnightly meetings. I guess our hand was forced via COVID when the impact came about public presentation to council meetings, and we made a very good decision to live stream. And we made the decision to cut costs by only having one centre set up with the equipment where we are today in the Tully Chamber. And we've alternated across this venue on a fortnightly basis. But with the workload that's required to prepare the agenda and the tight time frames, the community expect the agenda to be available on the Monday leading into the Thursday meeting. There's a number of reasons why it's time that we moved on. And again, I just want to highlight that a big part of why we had fortnightly meetings was one in Tully, one in Innisfail, to keep the people who were forced to amalgamate, who even to this day, some are not happy. So it's time to move on, draw a line in the sand, and we've made a decision, which was a good one, to make Tully our main centre for council meetings. All the technical equipment set up here, and I move the recommendation. Seconded by Councillor Norwood. Councillor Pervin.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, one question. Will these meetings, any chance of them being open to the public again?
over to the CEO.
Through the chair, they are currently open to the public. We had a couple of members attend today as COVID restrictions are adjusted based on immunisation rates or vaccination rates. Certainly something that can be considered. So the Act requires us to advertise the dates, but those decisions around actually opening up and our capacity within this chamber can be assessed moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pervin, good question. I think Mr Sadler, who chairs the Pandemic Committee, will keep a close watch on the border opening mid-December. The fact that we're still not at 80% fully vaxxed in Queensland, we could have an influx of southern visitors who could change the scope of what's going to happen in terms of COVID positive cases. So I think it's something we've got to watch and monitor. But early in the new year, I'm sure Mr Sadler will have another look at it, see what happens with the border opening for Queensland mid-December and see if there is a spike in COVID cases. But we need to be careful because we do have a duty of care to protect our staff as well. Councillor Chewy.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm fully in support of this, although I did have to struggle because I have been used to attending meetings over the years in both places. But after the discussion with Councillor McLeod last night, there's no organisation that meets twice a month. The Lions don't, the Rotary don't, the Girl Guides don't, school P&Cs don't. So it makes sense that we meet monthly. I believe we will achieve more. We'll have more time. It'll be longer meetings, and I think it'll be a better outcome. It will take a little time for people to adjust to it, I do believe, but I think it will be a much better outcome for all. So thank you.
Yeah, the other positive is that we have a philosophy of all of the information for all of the people all of the time. Well, the people who bring that to us is our staff. They need time to prepare their reports correctly, fully inform us, so there's no apprehension when we come to a monthly meeting and look at the recommendation written into the officer's report. We need to be fair to our staff as well in preparing these reports. Councillor McLeod.
Yeah, having been part of many committees and all the rest of it, I've never sat on a committee that we've met more than once a month. If there is anything that has come up urgent, then there is a special meeting that is called. So rest assured that I take would still happen if that was needed.
Through the chair, certainly, yeah, council has the opportunity to advertise and hold a special meeting for anything that is time critical.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to general business, and I just want to remind everybody we have a very important commitment at the RSL. They've asked us to be present by 10:40, so if we could keep the general business to critical matters, please. Councillor Chewy.
And I promise to everybody I will be very brief. I just would like Mr Goodman to come to the table, please. I just have one very quick question for him. Thank you. Well, that's not my fault. So, Mr Goodman, I'm just seeking an update on the path at South Mission. There has been a slight halt to the works. I'm just wondering if there's an update on where it's headed and if there is a completion date. Thank you.
If you just, through the chair, just bear with me so I can give you a more accurate answer. I received an email on this morning. Through the chair, there was a proposed amendment to the alignment of the path. The original design had it going between the, I guess, the barbecue area and the beach, and following some feedback from the community, the project team agreed that it would be a better alignment to have it on the western side of that amenities area, that barbecue sheltered area. that has come with some minor complications. It was significant funding for this project provided through Department of Transport and Main Roads, and their funding agreement requires sign off on any scope changes to the project. So it did take a little while. Not an unreasonable amount of time, but it did take some time to get a formal agreement from DTMR for that change. That has happened. They have agreed. The work does take some. There are some additional works required to the original contract. It does push out and take in some of the area that's designated there for car park at the moment. So there has been also required some negotiations with the contractor on the cost of the variation of the contract. That has happened. We're expecting the survey to allow the works to the new design to be completed today, and works should recommence on Monday at that site, and the expected completion date for that project is the end of this month.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman.
Thank you, Councillor Toohey. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, yes. This question is for Councillor McLeod, who advised me the other day that you're in discussions with Mr. Knuth about the upgrade of Castor Park. As Castor Park sits on Council's asset register, and we are in the midst of asset rationalisation, I was unaware of any upgrades to this asset. And my question to you, has the grant been lodged in your capacity as a councillor or your capacity as the Treasurer of Castor Park Management Committee? And to my knowledge, there's not been any council resolution to go after funding for this. So if the application is successful, what will the cost be to the ratepayers through maintenance and depreciation, or will Castor Park be funding its own maintenance and depreciation? Thank you.
Councillor Millwood, I might refer this one to the CEO initially, and then we can go to Councillor McLeod. You happy to answer it?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm happy. So just to make everybody aware that prior to coming onto council, Innisfail United Football Club, who is one of the major users of Castor Park, had put a submission together to the state government for Castor Park to try and secure a grant of just over $700,000. There was support from Boogan, which I'm currently president of, and Castor Park Management Committee, which I am treasurer of. And this was all done prior to me coming onto council. And I think it's a great step for that area and the users that use Castor Park. And I'll put the rest over to Mr. Graffin.
Just through the chair, we did meet with the management committee at Castor Park this week to commence those negotiations around the lease. Castor Park is probably a little bit more unique than some of our other assets because there are facilities there that are community facilities, such as a playground and some open space areas that aren't just specific to the user groups that use that area. So whilst the conversation talked to the requirement of council to have a formal either lease or user agreement there, and that lease to assist clubs like Innisfail United in chasing funding for some of these assets, there's still a negotiation ongoing there around how those responsibilities will be split. So certainly around the infrastructure there, but like I said, it's probably a little bit more unique because there are assets within Castor Park that do have a much broader community need, such as the playground that council has installed in that facility.
Councillor Purban.
Yeah, just in relation to the funding application, I was approached by Paulo De Carlo as a council representative at the time to offer my support behind the funding for the lights and the funding for the lights in the car park, specifically based around the fact that Silkwood Soccer Club closed up, and there are now 600 kids there of a Saturday afternoon and no parking whatsoever. I myself, as a parent, have witnessed that, as has many other council staff, and I was getting lobbied very hard by the people out there about parking in just mud, literally parking in mud. And at the time I asked Mr. Gott if he could get behind and throw a letter of support to Paul DiCarlo from the soccer club. And as far as I'm aware, that letter of support was given, and it's now with Shane Knuth, who's presented it to Parliament to try and get some funding for the lights in the car park, which is in desperate need of it.
So my reply back to that is that I don't have a problem with any of that happening, but if it's going to be on our asset register, it should come to council and decisions need to be made. So that's all I'm saying.
Mr. Goodman?
Through the chair, there has been ongoing negotiations with the Castor Park Management Committee and about entering into a formal lease. And while I don't have the detail, it's been largely managed by officers in my department. The feedback that I've got to date is that committee has been one of the most proactive and supportive of the principles that council adopted in dealing with these assets. So yes, while the negotiations are not complete and the lease is not signed, there are very positive signs that the eventual agreement will be very reflective of the principles that council adopted in, I believe, January this year.
Yes, because that sort of amount that goes back onto our asset register is rather large, so we need to make sure that that reflects back onto Castor Park and their management committee so that it doesn't become a burden on our ratepayers. That's all I'm saying.
Through the chair, the law presumes that all buildings and improvements built by the lessees will become the property of council unless there is an agreement which states that those improvements remain the property of the lessee. So through our principles, the intent of that negotiation is that those assets that have been built and the funding that's been sought will remain the property of the lessee. Like we said, it's a little bit more unique there that I don't. The negotiation is around some of those more broad community assets that sit within the broader Castor Park precinct, which the intent at the moment is to retain those for community use. So a exclusive lease of that area, there's still some negotiation there so we can maintain community. It's the only playground for residents living in that part of Marillion.
Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I mean, I think that was the entire point of why we put the principles and the engagement and the management stuff in place, so that the officers can negotiate and get these proper outcomes for us without it coming back to a council table every single time. I mean, you know, I understand there's significant funds involved, but you were in the room when we put the guidelines and the management agreements and how they are negotiated in place. I mean, I have every confidence in our excellent team, and I'm sure that they will make sure there's no excessive burden upon our ratepayers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Baines. Look, I have to agree with you. The underlying principle about asset rationalisation was about identifying underutilised assets, and if we can get them off our books to save on depreciation, insurance and maintenance, we're doing that. We've got an auction happening next month. But that doesn't mean that we don't build or improve on existing assets. And with Silkwood closing and that population of youth going to Castor Park, it's become a safety issue. The local member went there the other day and he had to park down near the bakery and walk up the edge of the road. No footpath there, so he walked up to Castor Park via the road. The parking is a major issue. It's impacting on public safety. It's been forced on us by the closure of Silkwood, and it's an existing asset. We've never said that we wouldn't improve on existing assets, but we are also going to retire assets that our staff identify as underutilised. It's a two-way street.
So you keep saying the closure of Silkwood. That's news to me, so maybe someone might want to enlighten me on that.
They're not operating Saturday afternoon soccer there for junior soccer anymore, and I know that firsthand because my son plays.
So through the chair, that negotiation is ongoing as well in line with our principles. So, you know, both of these negotiations are underway and, you know, both influence each other. We, council, as part of these principles, won't retain both at the same level of service. They'll look at usage and find a balance there that suits and is in line with the principles that have been adopted.
Councillor McLeod.
Just to clarify, Silkwood Soccer Club currently doesn't have any members, players in their club. They have got a small committee now trying to revamp it, but those people that are doing that do not have players playing for Silkwood. They're all old committee members coming back to help it. So it's very hard, and I feel that they're trying to do the best that they can, but they don't have any players. So I'm not saying Silkwood's closed, I'm saying Silkwood is in a hard place at the moment, Silkwood Soccer Club. And I don't know if they will ever recover, to tell you the honest truth. So,
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor McLeod, and I apologise if I used the wrong terminology. Councillor Millwood, are there any further general business items? If not, I'll declare the meeting closed at 10:27 and see us all down at the Cenotaph at 10:40.
And remind everyone to do a minute silence.
And then we're returning here for the project update from Mr. Graffin.
I won't be